work. Here we go. Belbin team roles, theory and application. It starts, as most stories and journeys start, with two incredible people. And in this case, these people are Dr. Meredith Belbin and Dr. Eunice Belbin. Now, they met at Cambridge. They were both undergrads there. Meredith started at Clare College and he started reading classics and then went over to industrial psychology. Eunice, she studied at Girton, which I believe at the time was a female-only college, and she studied anthropology. They both got PhDs in their respective areas. In fact, Meredith will say that it was Eunice's real love of understanding people and observing people and seeing how they interact that really got him to really get involved in the subject. So they met at Cambridge and they married very soon after their studies. And Meredith Belbin did give me his permission to use their wedding photo here. I do think it's a beautiful couple they make. So because of this interest in people, they started working together in Cambridge and they put together the Industrial Training Research Unit. Now, this was a unit that was there for research. It was to understand more about how people work, how they train, how they interact within the workspace. And it was headed by Eunice. As you can see, she's the one with the OBE. And she was the one who was actually Meredith Belbin's boss. I just like to put that there because I think sometimes these things are forgotten. Eunice, I have to say, she sadly died about 15 years ago. Incredible woman. She was the most fiercely intelligent person I have ever met, but was also the kindest and had so much empathy. She was an incredible woman. And Meredith Belbin's actually sitting in the office as we speak. He's 97 and he's working on some new material at the moment. So the story starts with these two people and them putting together the Industrial Training Research Unit in Cambridge. So why does that matter? Well, it matters because that's why Henley Business School got in touch with them. So Henley Management College at the time, I think they're now part of Reading University, they are the oldest business school in Europe. And what they did is they brought managers together. They brought managers together who were earmarked for being in those upper echelons of management. And what they did, I believe they were the first business school to do this, but they used syndicate working so that managers, the people on their courses, could share their experiences and they could learn from others. So throughout all of the courses at Henley, they weren't necessarily a lecture format. They had syndicates of people working together. And this was interesting because this threw up some questions, and they were questions that Henley couldn't necessarily answer, hence them getting in contact with the Industrial Training Research Unit. So they realized that some of these syndicates were functioning better than others, but they didn't understand why that was, because in theory, all the people who were attending Henley were impressive managers already in their own right. They wouldn't have been going on a course unless they had what it took to be incredibly successful. So it was quite an interesting one that when you put these these managers together, the output didn't quite seem right. And what Henley were unable to do is put their finger on this. They were unable to say which of these syndicates were going to work well and which ones weren't. So what Henley did is they developed an executive management exercise. It took a year, well, that would have been a really dull course, wouldn't it? Been going on for far too long. It took a week, and they put groups together. They now term them as companies. And the great thing about this exercise was that there was an outcome that could be measured because there was a financial outcome, because it was an exercise with measurement throughout. So this time they had some data. So they had all of these syndicate teams now working as part of a 1 week management exercise with an outcome. Brilliant. However, it didn't help them that much because they still couldn't find out what was it that linked the output to the input. What was it that they needed to look at? So that's where the Industrial Training Research Unit came in. And so Meredith Belbin and his team, with Eunice Belbin. We have Bill Hartson, who was the English chess champion at the time. Jean Fisher, who was an anthropologist who specialised in observing Kenyan tribes and women's role within. Some really incredible people, ones that you'd want to go to dinner with, yeah, because they were also interesting. They got involved and they started going to Henley and trying to work out what are the inputs. We need to look at these. But they needed to measure these, didn't they? They needed to know what the inputs were. So everybody who attended these courses, everybody who was part of a syndicate, they were allowed not to do this, don't worry, there was a get out clause. There was a battery of tests, of measurements that happened so that we understood a little bit more about them. So everybody completed the 16 personality factors questionnaire, not the 16 PF, which is free for anybody to try on the internet, which I don't know the background there, but Catel's 16 PF, which I know we use a lot in the Belbin office as well. Also, the personal preference questionnaire. So they knew about your personality from the 16 PF. The personal preference questionnaire was put together by this team, and it was there to work out your values, your motivations, what gets you up in the morning, what do you value, what is that carrot for you? And this is a question, again, to find out a little bit more about you. They also needed something to measure kind of an intelligence test. So they used the Watson-Glaser critical thinking appraisal. This was a quick, consistent, accurate measure, and the ability to analyze, reason, interpret, and draw logical conclusions. So this is what the Watson-Glaser critical thinking appraisal did. So they had lots of data. They then devised a new game because although the 1 week exercise was okay, there were some limitations to it. So they put together a new game which just took a day. It was called Teamopoly. There was far less reliance on computer systems and far more about the interaction between people. And whilst they were playing this game, they also started using Bayes' analysis. Now, I am in awe of the people who were able to use this. And you can see why the anthropology side of things was incredibly important here, because they wanted to find out who was doing the talking and what was the nature of the talk, what was going on when these syndicates, when these teams were playing Teamopoly. So they were measuring who was in the asking, informing, proposing, opposing, delegating, who's building, and who's commentating. Now, this data was taken every 30 seconds. So every half a minute, I'll just say that every half a minute, somebody was there with a pencil, and this is before computers, this is in the 70s, 60s and 70s, and everybody, this was all written. We still have a mass of these papers here at Belbin. So they had data. And I think this is really important here because they didn't know at this point what they were going to find. They didn't start off saying, right, what we're going to do is we're going to find a questionnaire that we can find people's strengths. This wasn't the starting point for this research. The starting point for this research is, why do some of these syndicates work brilliantly and why some less so? What we need to find out, well, we need to look at data. Okay. So they looked at data and they thought, well, what do we do? What should we do? Right. Let's put all the really high intellect people together, because surely intellect is what makes a team work well. So it's their first hypothesis. And this is what they kept doing. They came up with hypotheses and then they proved them, disproved them, refined them, came up with new ones. So this is what they looked at. They said, right, all of those people who scored highly on the Watson-Glaser critical thinking appraisal, let's put them together, because surely that's the secret of a successful team. But what they found actually was that there was just too much time spent with people saying, no, that won't work. My idea is better. So always in this abortive debate. They were very difficult to manage. They didn't necessarily work well together. And actually, on average, they performed worse than any of the other companies, any of the other teams they put together. In fact, let me get my glasses because I like this fact. So they looked at this 25 times. So they actually put together 25 Apollo teams, or companies, and of those 25, only that only 3 times did they become the winning team. The average positioning when these teams were all working and they were playing this exercise and they were competing against each other, was actually 6 out of 8. So the most popular, the most common finishing position for these Apollo teams was 6 out of 8. And I'm stressing that because I wouldn't be put in this Apollo team. I'd be feeling a little bit left out, on the side there. So I think it's really important, to look at this. So these teams that were put together just with intellect didn't work. And what they found actually was the lack of that coherent teamwork of working together just nullified any of the gains that they should have had due to their brilliance. And what they looked again, they looked at the data and realized there were really high levels of those proposing and opposing from Bayes' analysis. I think it's quite important at this point to say that this research was over 9 years at Henley Management College. Over 200 teams or syndicates were looked at. So this went on again and again. They were able to go back and try different things. After 9 years, I think they felt that they'd overstayed their welcome at Henley. So they went to Australia and they did 3 tours of Australia at the management schools there. And they repeated a lot of this and got kind of the same results. So, okay, so the first hypothesis, get all of the really high intellect people together. No, that didn't work. What's next? Well, we've got other data there. Let's look at the personalities. So they put teams together with similar personalities, looking at this Raymond Cattell 16 PF. And they put the stable extroverts, the anxious extroverts, the stable introverts, and the anxious introverts together with differing results. Some were better than others. Some were rather dependent on the cohesion between them. Some were quite good when things were all going, but actually when things weren't, a bit unreliable. Yeah, as you can see, you can read the slide. Putting teams together with similar personalities, that wasn't key. That wasn't what was causing some teams to be brilliant and some teams less so. So they'd looked at intellect and they'd looked at similar personalities. And then they went back to the drawing board. What do we look at now? So they looked at all of the data and they said, right, we've got all of these teams that have succeeded, who've won, who've done really well in this one-day Teamopoly session. What do they all have in common? Let's go back to the data and see, what do all of these teams have in common? And what they found was, in common, they had a behavior, one could say, which was incredibly efficient, who got things done because they needed to be done, who were hardworking, who were practical. They'd actually, without realizing it, they had found that first cluster of behaviors that we now call a team role. They found the implementer behavior. Now, the implementer behavior, they're the ones who like process. They like Excel spreadsheets, Gantt charts, Trello boards, I'm finding at the moment. And they do the work that needs to be done, not the work that they want to do. They're not in it for personal glory. Sometimes you say that these are the type of people that almost have the hologram of the organization that they work for on their forehead, because they're doing it because the company needs it to be done. Like I say, they're also very loyal. So very loyal to the organization. They're the ones rolling up their sleeves and just plowing through. So, okay, so we've identified that the winning teams all had one of these behavior, one of these people in common. So they decided to put together teams based just of implementers, which was okay. It wasn't too bad. The problem was, however, when things changed, when problems came up, when new ideas were needed, the implementers didn't seem to have the capacity to change quickly, to respond quickly to new. They were more interested in the process and the procedure of what happened before. So the researchers said, well, we've got something here. We've got something. So we know we need this type of behavior, these clusters of characteristics within a team. What we'll look at now is we are going to look at what we need in terms of creativity, because we know that teams need creativity. So they went back to the data and they said, right, where are all the ideas coming from? And so what they did is they looked at the proposing on the Bales analysis. Who was proposing ideas? Who's coming up with those? And actually, they looked at it. They realized what they weren't after actually was some of these were coming up with lots and lots and lots of ideas. Not all of them were any good, they found actually. But what they did find was if their proposer also had a very high IQ, so on the Watson Gleason thinking critical analysis, they did find that there's a type of behavior that was coming through. And what they had found was the behavior of plants. Now, these are the ones who were a bit coming up with ideas slightly left of centre. They weren't the obvious ideas. The plant behaviour, it was coming from people sitting by themselves. It wasn't necessarily coming from lots of communication, very free thinking, very thought. Lots of things were going on up here. And they were able to contribute different ideas to the team. As they were going through these, they said, well, these are really great strengths, really great positives, but there were also some what we call weaknesses, allowable weaknesses associated with each of these. And so the plant behavior, they did find that actually sometimes it was too busy going up here and it's a bit difficult to try and get that communication going. They're a bit too preoccupied. And they really, and it struggled with the communication sometimes. So they thought, brilliant. Okay, so we've got the efficient ones, we've got the ideas, we've got the creative team roles. What next? Well, actually, they went back to the data and they thought we haven't got all of that creativity yet because some of those things that are being proposed aren't coming from this newly discovered plant behavior. Where are they coming from? And that's where they found the team role of the resource investigator. And these are the ones who were going outside of the team. They were developing relationships. They're looking under every single rock for an idea, a way somebody else is doing something, looking for opportunities. And they were the ones who were bringing that back to the team. So a different type of creativity, which didn't show up they only managed to find again by looking at the data. Who else is making the proposing? So quite different types of creativity here. The plant could say is usually quite sort of introverted, very, very high IQ, whereas the resource investigator very extroverted. And what they did find is that they had really high social skills because they were able to negotiate with people, form really strong relationships. They were inquisitive, stable extroverts who were bringing the information to the team. Now, their weaknesses was that sometimes that they promised the earth and didn't deliver. They get bored very, very easily. But again, that's okay as long as people know that. Okay, so where do we have it? We have the organised implementer, we have the creativity, which came from both the plant and the resource investigator, either new, original ideas or ideas that had been, acquired, shall we say the word acquired from others, seen from elsewhere. So what did the team then look at? Well, the team then decided to look at the types of leadership within a team. Who was kind of the what's the word? The dominant characters within the team. And what they looked at is what they found is the role of the coordinator. And they found that the teams who had a coordinator fared very well. And these were the ones that were able to take a step back, let everything go on around them, take the broad objective of the team, and then be able to allocate tasks accordingly, delegate effectively, see who was great at something. They really were the ones who were able to, take the broader overview. Now, their allowable weaknesses, sometimes they can be seen as manipulative and sometimes they can be seen to be so good at delegation, you do kind of wonder what they're doing, but very, very much needed. I'm trying to think, so I've got so many notes around me. I love this webinar, but I have got copious notes. I have secret specialist, and I just want to just give this quote to you, is that the coordinator is someone tolerant enough to always listen to others, but strong enough to reject their advice. And I believe that was by Bill Hartson, the British chess champion. And I think that really does sum up a coordinator incredibly well, which is why I wanted to be able to give that to you. They're very trusting, their nature, they're very strong, a lot of moral commitment to achieve the goals. Also had sort of like a practical realism as well, actually. But there was more to it. There was more. Again, like with the plant and resource investigator, there was another group of characteristics which didn't fit the coordinator role, but were still very dominant within the team. So where were they? And that's where they got the role of shaper. Now, the shapers are ones with really high energy, really high drive. They're very competitive. They need everybody to get to that point as quickly as possible. They want it yesterday. They're the ones that don't tolerate sort of slowness or lack of efficiency. They need things done. They're very challenging. They're extroverted. They have a lot of high nervous energy. It keeps them going. And they have a real need for achievement. So this was the second sort of more dominant role that they found during their research, and very, very competitive. Um, I've got some other things here. Actually, what they found was different. These two team roles came to the fore at different times, depending on what it was that the team required. Where were the team in their process? Really depended on whether or not the coordinator or the shaper came to the fore. One other thing to mention at this point is that this wasn't all done in isolation in an educational setting. As this was going on, obviously these courses weren't going on all of the time. A lot of the work then went elsewhere, and they looked in industry and they said, is this true? Can we see examples of this happening within organizations? And then they would actually refine their models depending on that as well. Okay, practical, too creative, too dominant. What was next? Well, again, they went back to the data. And what they were looking for is who was the decision maker within the team. Because very often we make the assumption, perhaps incorrectly, that it's the person who is chairing the team, who is dominant, who is making the decisions. But actually, that wasn't the case. Here they found the resource investigator. They were the ones who took all of the information in, took out all of the emotion, weighed up the pros and cons, and worked out which way was best to go forward. Um, High level of mental ability combined with disinterested attachment, I have written in my notes. And the great thing about the monitor evaluator is that they came when they were needed. So their contribution, they're very good at making a good timed contribution. They came to the fore when those crucial decisions needed to be made. They take pride in never being wrong, but they stake no claim towards an originality. And actually, it's quite interesting that the monitor evaluators are the only ones who are able to hold their own with the plants in debate, which I also think is quite interesting there. So it's the monitor evaluator, not the coordinator, not the shaper, who should be the arbiter of the decision making within the team. Now, the weaknesses there are they're not the most inspirational, but you're not looking for inspiration from your monitor evaluator. You're looking for them to be right. Sometimes, again, they were a little bit overcritical, but again, this is okay as long as people are aware of that. So what was the next team role that came to the fore? Well, they did notice that there was a team role that wasn't necessarily overtly visible. But they did find that there was a team role, a behaviour that was encouraging everybody to ensure that their voice was heard. They were worried that some people's voices were being squeezed out. And we've all been in those meetings, haven't we? And there was actually somebody who was there who's trying to make sure that every voice was heard, who cared about the contribution of everybody. And actually, those people would save the day. They would make this intervention that would potentially stop any friction happening within the team. They're the ones that could pick this up because they had great empathy, great listening skills, and they could really read the team incredibly well to make sure that everybody was playing the part that was needed, that the team needed them to play. So great at listening to others, great empathy, coping with awkward people. They again put the team objectives before themselves. So remember we said that about the implementer, didn't we? It's the same with the team worker. They're putting the needs of others before their own. They're very social. They have low dominance, very trusting, very sensitive, and an interest in people. This is really the team worker role. The allowable weakness for them is sometimes a bit indecisive. They don't want to upset anybody. Sometimes they avoid the confrontation. Again, we're going to have this weakness. It's the flip side to the strength. If you're going to be brilliant at something, something's going to have to give. Yeah. Okay, so they had the team worker as well. So here we go. What's the next role? Sometimes the researchers found that the teams were working really well, and it was almost obvious which ones were going to win because they were galloping ahead to the finishing line, and everybody was a bit cocksure, a little bit confident. Yeah, we've got this. And then they'd fall at the final hurdle. And these are the teams that didn't value this behavior. And this was seen as absolutely critical in checking that the detail was there. So the completer finisher roles are really high anxiety, and that's because they check, check, and check again. Some would say you shouldn't call them completer finishers because they never really finish. They always can make things a little bit better. Perhaps a completer polisher would be a better explanation for them. Again, I've written here, this is directly from some of the research. Attention to detail is not a trivial matter. Someone with a capacity for relentless follow through is a real asset to any team. And this is what we had, an introverted, self-disciplined, high anxious person to be able to do that. Okay, so we think we've got them here, haven't we? We've got the organized, we've got the creative, we've got the dominant, we've got the decision maker, we've got the one that makes sure that the team gels, and we've got the attention to detail. And this is what they had. Actually, they identified 8 team roles at Henley. And then they took it into industry. They took it to Cadbury Schweppes, ICI, and they said, right, we've identified that for a successful team, we need these 8 team roles. But actually it didn't quite work. They found they were missing something. And this is the gorgeous thing about this whole idea of researchers coming up with this, because they were constantly refining, constantly checking and looking for different things. And what we have is the last team role of a specialist. Now, the specialist wasn't needed necessarily at Henley because they had to make an assumption that a certain amount of knowledge was already there and it was already shared. So they made that assumption incorrectly when working in industry. And they found that they needed somebody who had a love of learning. Sometimes I think specialist is a bit misleading because it's more of a job title and it's not meant to be a job title. It's the one who has a love of learning, a real deep dive into a subject area. The ones actually that almost say this is like a hobby. This is a real interest. I happen to get paid for it. They're really self-starting, they're dedicated, and they provide skills that are needed for the team. Their allowable weakness, sometimes they contribute on quite a narrow front. They don't see the bigger picture, but that's okay because that's what the coordinator is there for. So there we have it. We have 9 team role behaviours. And once these were identified, Meredith started putting the teams together and started to also predict which teams would work well and which ones wouldn't. And he was doing this with over 80% accuracy. So he was saying, right, with these particular behaviors, with all of this data, this is going to be who comes first, second, third, and fourth. They'd got it, they'd cracked it. They had found those 9 distinct clusters of behavior which facilitated the success of a team. There he is, look. So Dr. Meredith Belbin and his team found this. And like I say, they repeated it when they did tours of Australia as well. I can see we've got going in the chat here, people sharing their team roles. I know a few of you, and yes, I would agree. I also scored 0 in CF. Actually, Michael, I beat you on. I'm actually negative completer finisher because I have list B words ticked for me for completer finisher without any A words and without any self-perception as well. But I have really high shaper, coordinator, and resource investigator. Obviously, that's why I'm here. And I think this is the key thing, isn't it? Is that none of us are just one thing. Belbin isn't about putting you in a box. And you may have come across that when you come across Belbin perhaps many years ago. And perhaps the trainer that you had wasn't accredited. Perhaps they just did it as a quick exercise. Is that we are all a wonderful mix of all of these 9 clusters, these 9 team roles. Obviously, we have some strengths in more rather than others. So some we play more naturally than others, and they're the ones we need to identify. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't play any of these other roles. What we need to understand is what the team needs and how we can best make the contribution so that the team fits its objectives. And this is where Belbin is different to others. And this is why Belbin really is the gold standard team tool, because it starts with the team. What does a team need to be successful? Now, there is a whole long list there, and I'm sure we could sit here for days talking about objectives, talking about psychological safety. But the other key thing that a team needs is a mix of all of these 9 behaviors. Not all at the same time, not all in the same people, and not one person per team role. We need to understand how we can use our own team role strengths to the benefit of the team. We're starting with the team, not the individual. So, yeah, not being just being able to list those 9 team roles isn't enough. You need to start using them. So, what makes an effective team? Well, first of all, you need those 9 team role clusters, those team role behaviors. But everybody needs to understand not just their strengths when it comes to these 9 team roles, but also the strengths and weaknesses of each other. It's not just about me, it's about everybody else in the team and making sure that you understand the strengths and weaknesses of everyone. Then what we need to do is start using the language of Belbin, and I think that's why it works so incredibly well, is it gives you a shortcut. It gives you a shorthand even to be able to talk quickly about your strengths, your weaknesses, how you best work together, how you're going to annoy each other, etc., etc. That's what makes an effective team. Now, here's another. Here we go. Yes, we need to make sure that those roles are understood by everybody there. I'm just going to quickly show this next slide because this is talking about the fact that not. I'll start again. Sometimes when we do team workshops, everyone goes, "Oh, we've got to work as a team. We've all got to do everything together." You're like, no. What you need to know is when you need to play that role and which role you need to play. It's very, very much a case of being on stage. There's entrances, there's exits. Everybody's in the wings. Everybody knows the script, and it's to understand when you need to get on that stage. And here we have that information in a slide. This is we worked together with an organisation to help them with their project timelines, actually, and trying to break down projects, which behaviours are needed at certain points. And this is unique to them. Your timeline may look completely different. Which team roles are needed at which point to make sure that you, in this case here, the plant and resource investigator behaviour stays at the ideation stage and doesn't get really involved in that implementation stage where perhaps they may think, let's have another idea, and they start from the beginning again. Working out when you need each of these, depending on what your team needs to do, is really important. So I'm just going to go back to basics here a little bit, just to make sure we have complete clarity. Is what we're talking about is not personality. We're talking about behavior. So Belbin measures behavior. Personality obviously comes in and informs our behavior, as does our mental abilities, as do our values and our motivations, our experiences, our external influences. We used to talk about cases of things you can't do anything about, like mergers, acquisitions. We now just say COVID. And also role learning. As you understand your role within a team, understand each of these team roles and the roles that you are playing, again, this informs your behavior. So what this is saying, and this is a crucial takeaway, is that it isn't fixed. We can change things. We can learn things. We can develop things. So our behavior, your team role behaviors isn't, this is my team role behavior and this is what will be forever. That's not the case. It can change. And so it should, especially if we have a growth mindset and we are able to grow, develop and learn as we go through our professional lives. So we're measuring behavior, just another slide there, which reiterates the same thing. If it's not your DNA, that's fixed. Your personality, how many of you have said or heard, I don't bring my personality to work. I'm different to how I am down the pub. And this is what we're talking about again here. The personality is under the water. Not everybody can see that. What behavior is how does all of this manifest in the way that we interact with others and interact with our work? Which raises another crucial piece of information there, because at the work at Henley, they identified these 9 behaviours. But what they did notice is some people are better at identifying them in themselves than others. Some people have a higher level of self-awareness than others. So some people are saying, yes, I think I must be a shaper. And everybody around is going, no, we don't see that actually. So it was important to get the feedback from other people, because they're the bit that are observing this bit, this boat, yes, this behavior. Get other people's feedback. There's nothing worse, is there? They're sitting around a table and somebody's saying how brilliant they are at something, and nobody else is seeing that. Yes, I'm a red. Are you really? I'm not sure you are. So Belbin adds in that other element. You fill in the questionnaire, you find out how you see your strengths in terms of all those 9 team roles, but then you ask for feedback from other people. We call them observer assessments. And it's not just us who feel how important this is. This is a great article from HBR. I would recommend that you look at it, and it's looking at high internal self-awareness and also high external self-awareness. People, they know who they are, they know what they want to accomplish, they seek out and values other opinions, and this is where leaders begin to fully realize the true benefits of self-awareness. We need to get feedback from others. So you have how you see yourself, how others see you. Then you can reflect on that. This is fabulous information. And then your increased level of understanding of self-awareness goes up. So Belbin isn't about you just filling in a questionnaire and saying, yes, I am A. It's more complicated than that. And that's where the use really comes in. So Belbin for individuals, it's for you, it's for self-development, it's for learning, it's for self-awareness. To learn where and when you can make your best contribution, because we all have different contributions to make. And sometimes we make those contributions at the wrong time and it backfires and we're a little bit hesitant to do it again. But understanding more about Belbin, about yourself, the team, other people's strengths, is understanding how you can contribute for the team to meet its objective. When do you need to change those team roles? When do I need to take my shaper hat off and perhaps put my coordinator hat on? Where do I need to look in the team to make sure that somebody else is playing the completer finisher? We need to understand how others see you, because it's no good working on this false premise of this is where your strengths are. You need to find that out by asking people. And when we talk about asking people, we say people who know you well, who you trust, who are working with you right now and have done for at least 3 months. Because remember, we change. There's no point asking for feedback from people who maybe worked in a project 6 years ago, because I should imagine you've grown and developed since then. Also, don't ask your family, because they don't really know how you are at work, do they? What else can you do for Belbin individuals? You can learn how to be a stronger example. What do we mean by that? Well, instead of just being one of my top roles as shaper, how can I be the best shaper I could possibly be for the good of the team and for the team to support you in that? So how do you do that? Well, you complete the Belbin Self-Perception Inventory. Everything is online. We're on the 8th version of the reports. All of our work here at Belbin HQ goes into the research and the development to make sure that the advice that these reports give you is really useful. You also need to ask for feedback from others. And in that case, what we say is a minimum of 4, because we need to get, more than just one person who really likes you. We need to get a minimum of 4 bits of feedback before we'll say anything about it. And this generates the Belbin individual report. If anybody is using a self-scoring version, a tick one, if anybody's using one they've downloaded from the internet, which is free of charge, that is not Belbin. If anybody is using and finding out their Belbin team roles other and getting reports that look different from the ones that I'm now about to show, it might be an older version perhaps, but it's not Belbin. People think that Belbin is very simple. In fact, there's so much complexity beneath the surface. So what do these reports look like? Well, first of all, they'll talk about you, how you see your strengths. Are they your preferred roles, your manageable roles, your least preferred roles? How do you see you? We'll then get feedback from other people. How do they see you? Which words are they using? So the observer assessments is just a list of words that people tick. They go, yes, that really does sum up Joe, or in this case, Ali. There's 2 lists of words. One list is related to list A, the strengths, and list B to those allowable weaknesses we've talked about. So what we have here is saying, which words did they tick? Were they the strengths for each of the team roles, or were they looking a bit more at those associated weaknesses? And what does this look like compared to ourselves? You see this much, they see this. Why? Let's ask questions. Why do people see different strengths than I do? Do I have strengths I never knew existed? My goodness, this is useful information. We then put all of the data together, and we give you a combined profile. And this is your overall profile. This is the letter from Meredith Belbin. If Meredith Belbin were to write a letter to you to say, what does this mean and how can I use this information? What advice would you give me? This is the page. And this is the use. This is where you get light bulb moments, especially when you give people time to read those. We will then look at algorithms and we'll look at cutoff points, and we'll be quite a complex calculation in the background, and we'll look at what your best working environments. How would you best present yourself? What strengths do you have? What weaknesses should you be aware of? And these aren't based just on your top 2 or 3 roles. These are looking at how much of each of those roles. It's also looking at how little of some of those roles as well, looking at combinations of team roles, 2, 3, 4 team roles in some cases. So it could be that your top 2 team roles are the same as somebody else, but you may have different elements popping up here. And how would you suggest somebody works? Looking at that combination of team roles. What sort of work are you best suited for? Then you can find out what the other people did say. What team roles did other people, did those observers see? You can't see which words, but you can say which team roles they saw. And the question here is, what is your relationship with that person? Is your manager seeing you different to your colleagues? And then you've got a list of all of those words that you can see to describe you, that can start your journey. Which words are you really happy with? Which ones will you wish were lower down? Which ones would you wish were higher up? What are you going to do to make that happen? And this is the practical use of Belbin. How we work and how your accredited people and our distributors, they work with teams and they start with the individual. What are the strengths that you have? Then we can put all of this data in a team report and we can start really exploring who should do what relationships are going to be critical within the team, and it starts the team moving forward to be able to hit their objectives. Now, there's people here in the chat who've used Belbin with many organizations. If you wanted to put some of those organizations in there, so people that you know have used these Belbin reports and the benefits that they've had from those, that would be absolutely great. Just so that I'm not saying them, basically, it just comes from other people. It's always a useful thing. It's a practical tool. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click this button here. No, I'm not. I'm going to click that button there. There you go. And I'm just going to drag this high-tech, very high-tech flip chart over. And I would say that the practical application starts when you have people in the room and they're all there sharing their top team roles. And what you can start doing is have people's names on sticky pads and start building up a picture of who is playing each role within the team. You then facilitate discussions. Okay, so we don't have anyone here in the monitor evaluator segment. What does that mean? Well, they're the ones who are the great decision makers. So how do we make decision makers? How do we make sure we make the right decisions within the team? Who else has it? Who has it somewhere in their profile? Okay, it could be that Chris has it as their 3rd or 4th role. Okay, Chris, we need you to play that role. Take all the other hats off. This is the role we need to play. How, as us, as a team, can we support you in playing that role? Once we get this within a team, we can spend hours here. It's the discussions between, perhaps we've got too much creativity. Perhaps we've got nobody actually doing anything. We split things into social roles, action roles. This is where the real value comes in. This is where companies like Sanofi, Johnson & Johnson use. There's some other ones there. The University of Chester Business School students, Argent Energy. There are some wonderful examples of how this is used. I remember going to Australia once, and no, it was New Zealand. And one team who used Belbin out there, a large government body, is they had one of these in every meeting room, so that before they started every meeting, they'd put down everybody's preferred roles or the roles they have real strengths in, and they'd be able to predict how that meeting would go, and they'd be able to put measures in place. If they just had all the social chatty roles, somebody had permission to tell everybody to be quiet because actually we need to do some implementation here. So it helps people to understand not just their contribution within the team, the contribution of others in relation to the team's objective. And this is why it's quite fluid. This is why you can't always say that it goes from A to B to C. It can't always be very implementer, because your team's objectives will change, which will mean that the behaviors required will change. So this needs to be referred back to time and time again. It's something that you can do on a very regular basis. Who else uses Belbin? Well, I know the UN uses Belbin on a quite regular basis to get those teams together quickly. Most universities within the UK use Belbin with their students. A lot of them also use a lot with their teaching team. We have Cranfield and the judge at Cambridge are using Belbin. There's lots of case studies on our website. You know, when your mind goes blank, when somebody says, well, who uses it? And suddenly you just have nothing in your head. There's plenty of case studies on our website. We've recently actually worked with Oppo Ice Cream. I love their ice cream. That's not a plug. They send it to us occasionally. And they're a really high growth small team. There's only about 20 of them. And they're using Belbin to help themselves grow. And what they're looking at is, where are the gaps within our teams at the moment? And what do we need to get bigger? What do we need to expand? So they're using it to really plan for the future, the gaps and the overlaps. Okay, I've spoken at you now for 50 minutes, which is a long, long time. Has anybody got any questions, any observations that they would like to make? Whilst you're all thinking of those and perhaps typing and then checking for your typos, just to really reiterate that Belbin is the gold standard team tool. If you want a language that will help your teams perform, Belbin has got a vast amount of research behind it. It's a practical tool. The reports are really easy to use and really easy to apply. And this is why, although we may have only been an employee ownership trust for the last 15 months, actually we've been around for 35 years. So it is something that people keep coming back to because they trust the research, they trust the development that is there with Belbin. In fact, a lot of the stuff we've been using at the moment comes from these two books here, Management Teams and Team Roles at Work. There is a library of resources there that tells you everything about Belbin. And you can become accredited as well. You can attend one of our courses and become gurus, like I know a lot of people are who are on the chat, who know everything there is to know about Belbin. As Gary says there, one of the key elements is using a tool which doesn't rely just on self-awareness. What we're doing there is having self-awareness plus, well, which is being enhanced by asking for feedback from other people. And this gives us a real understanding of the strengths other people see, but also how we can develop and grow and use those strengths again for the good of the team. And lastly, teams are really, really important. I keep saying it every year. I've been here now for almost 23 years, and I keep saying today, this year is going to be the year of the team. How much wealth of information do organizations need to realize that teamwork is their competitive edge, and to understand how your teams work together is really going to set you apart in the future. None of us individually have all of the answers, but do you know something? A team just might have. So this is really where Belbin comes in. Okay. This is an intro. We usually create teams based on their skills and abilities. We do, don't we? On their job titles, on what they've done before, but not on behaviors. And this is why sometimes we find that teams keep repeating the same mistakes because they're all quite similar, or we just don't know how to use everybody. When you're looking at team role behaviors, when looking at Belbin, you're not saying instead of their skills, you're saying what we need to look at is their functional role, but also we need to look at their team role as well. So it's a combination of both. What about commitment? What about competencies? Well, commitment, that's irrelevant, I suppose, really, for these team roles. Everybody needs to have commitment for the team to meet its objectives and understand the part that they are playing, understand why they're doing it. That's a real big, lovely Simon Sinek piece, isn't it? Is about why. Competencies, well, competencies and team roles, it's an interesting one because we can't all be brilliant at everything. We can't all tick a box that says I'm a competent here, 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 because it's not fair. We're only human, and we don't have all of these. So you can link them in a way to some of your competencies, some of these team roles, but to expect somebody to be able to tick the box for every single one is sometimes a little bit difficult, because we can't. We don't have those abilities. Maybe some people do. I just don't know who they are yet. Okay. How about Gallup? Thank you, Michael. So do you mean Gallup Strength Finder, or Gallup as an organization with a beautiful employee engagement survey stuff? I'm not sure. It's an interesting one. A quote from Gallup is that if people play to their strengths at least once a day, they're 6 times more likely to be engaged in the work that they do. So for me, trying to find that work that the team needs me to do that relates to my resource investigator, coordinator, shaper strengths is going to make me more engaged. If I had to keep doing work and the team needed me to be a completer, finisher, implementer, monitor, evaluator, I probably wouldn't have stayed here for 23 years. So yes, it's very much about aligning that. When it comes to Strength Finder, with Gallup, that's another great tool, but it's an individual tool. It's a tool of finding your strengths, and you come up with lots of combinations, don't you? Which is a great tool. And is used by many organizations, but that's not relating to team. It's helping perhaps managers manage. With team role behavior, looking at what does the team need. So again, it's starting from a different point. It's less about the individual. It's more about what does the team need, and then how do my strengths link in with that. So thank you, Michael, for the question. And I think that's important, isn't it? I don't know how many of you are HR and L&D professionals, management consultants, is that you have a toolbox. And what you want in your toolbox is a myriad of tools, all of which are brilliant for certain things. It's very difficult just to have one tool and expect that to work for all of that you have. So many different tools for many different jobs. The team tool is this one here of Belbin. Phew. Okay. I think I need a cup of tea now. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We had a quick look there at the theory. The theory went on for many years at Henley, which is now part of Reading University, back to their management school, where Meredith and his team were tasked with the question of why do some teams work and some teams are less successful? Why do some teams succeed and why do some teams not succeed? And over a period of time with his research team, they found that the most successful teams had a combination of all of these 9 team roles. And that is what the team needed to succeed. And to be able to use this language is going to help your teams succeed in the future. So thank you so much for joining us. You're now about to get the recording with all of the preamble at the beginning. If you do have any questions at all, please do contact us. team@belbin.com, or phone us. We're all here in the office. If you wanted to chat, there's no pressing one to speak to somebody. Phone us. Cambridge 01223 264 975. Lovely to see you all. Thank you very much, and goodbye.